Welcome to this explainer on the benefits of ethical transformations. We're moving way past treating ethics as just window dressing and really focusing on it as a deeply practical condition for real sustainable adoption. We're going to explore how to completely stop forcing change from the outside and instead create the exact conditions for people to participate from the inside out. So before we really dive in, I want you to think about this. When you hear the words ethical transformation, what real business challenge immediately comes to mind for you? Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll be navigating through why transformations matter and why they so often fail. Then we'll look at the ethical pivot, the 5 pillars, the practical do-it conversation path, and finally, how to take your very first step. All right, part 1, why ethical transformation matters. Let's look at some foundational values. It's a tough reality, but real adoption is incredibly rare when the human side of change gets completely ignored. That's exactly why communities like the Association for Ethical Transformations are built solidly upon the core values of dignity, empathy, trust, and responsibility. You see, every single transformation threatens 4 specific things that people fiercely protect: their dignity, their position, their income, or their self-esteem. Which means that when leaders label pushback as just resistance, they're often actually just seeing basic human survival behavior in the face of those threats. So think back to the struggles in your last major project. Which of those 4 areas was most deeply affected for your team? Moving on to part 2, why most transformations fail. Let's examine what methodological failure really looks like. Well, here's an uncomfortable truth for you. 50 to 70% of transformation initiatives absolutely miss their original objectives, which results in these debilitating hidden costs like employee apathy and significantly delayed returns. But here's the real crux of the issue. People don't actually resist change, they resist being changed. It's really a methodological failure, driven by organizations letting tight, aggressive deadlines completely replace genuine understanding. I want you to honestly reflect on your own leadership moments for a second. Where did you recently prioritize speed over real comprehension in a major project? Now, for part 3, the ethical pivot. This is all about activating ownership. We desperately need a massive shift from forcing strict compliance to actually genuinely listening to the vital data that employee resistance provides. By shifting our focus away from just managing stakeholders top-down to actually designing true conversation architecture, we can turn passive compliance into active shared meaning. Just imagine, how drastically would your day-to-day leadership work change if you actually started treating resistance as valid, highly useful data instead of just an annoying obstacle? Which brings us to part 4, 5 pillars of ethics. Let's talk about practical standards. To make this whole pivot actually actionable, we rely on 5 pillars that serve as real practical standards rather than just some abstract ideals. Those are ethical leadership that truly models the way, balancing financials with your people, ensuring active engagement, aligning individual talent, and maintaining sustainability over the long haul. Together, these 5 elements perfectly translate your good intentions into observable, day-to-day leadership behaviors that your team can actually see and, more importantly, trust. So, checking your gut here, which of these 5 pillars instinctively needs the absolute most attention in your current organizational context? That leads us into part 5. The do-it conversation path. Time to look at meaningful dialogues. Real lasting change requires a carefully designed sequence of meaningful dialogues rather than just forcing down top-down checklists. That's where the do-it model comes in. Discover, observe, ideate, and transform. It acts as a brilliant diagnostic tool to actively replace that crippling silence of unspoken fears with genuine shared understanding and truly co-created solutions. Take a moment and visualize a current change initiative you know really well. Which specific do-it phase is missing the most right now? Finally, part 6, take your first step. Let's get into some practical protocols. It's absolutely crucial that we leave you today with practical protocols rather than just a nice-sounding philosophy. Here are 3 super simple, zero-cost actions you can implement literally right now. Ask who hasn't been heard yet in the discover phase. Sit down and discuss personal meaning to observe, or run an ideate co-creation session before you even present solutions. You don't need a massive budget or a big fancy program to start, because just one single intentional choice is enough to spark a real shift. So out of those 3 options, which one would be the most useful for you to try out this week? At the end of the day, in any true ethical transformation, the decision to move forward is never forcefully imposed. Instead, it is carefully earned, actively shared, and willingly chosen by everyone involved. By building genuine empathy, deep trust, and a real conversation architecture right into your daily leadership, you're essentially inviting people to become true co-authors of the future. So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on. What is one conversation you are now completely willing to start differently?